Good morning. Today is a very special day. So today is our first annual RE Fall Party. And we are going to celebrate the beginning of our new fall program, which will start next Sunday. And hey, Finn, have a seat.
But the guest spots were all filled up.
That's okay, you're here now. All right. So it's a really special day, and we encourage you to come out. We have games, we have activities, we have a cake walk. Actually, it's a cupcake walk where you can have a sweet treat and learn about our RE program. There's an insert in your order of service this morning that talks about what our program is going to be looking like this year, and there are lots of opportunities for you all to become involved as teachers and volunteers. So please stop by the RE table and sign up. So today our story is a very old and it's a lost story of Dr. Seuss. It's one that we might not be familiar with, but it's not scary, not at all. So we're going to tell it to you today, and my friend Carter here is going to help me tell it. So, would you like to teach UUs? Tell me, which you'd choose? Class guide or workshop leader? Our RE kids need good teachers.
I could not teach UUs. That is something I would not choose. I can't imagine where I'd start. I've got no great knowledge to impart.
Could you, with a guide? Because the DRE will be at your side, and she'll work with you on the curriculum, so you'll feel smart and not dumb.
Well, possibly if there's a guide, if the DRE will be at my side, and she'll provide curriculum so I feel smart instead of dumb. But will someone be in class with me? Just think how nervous I will be.
Could you, if you thought you'd have some help each time you taught? Your worries would be non-existent. You would have some good assistance.
Well, I could do it if I thought that I'd have help each time I taught. But you know, I am awfully busy. I am on the membership committee. But I know that I should volunteer. Would I have to give a full year?
Well, you could do just 4 or even 2 weeks. Sure, you'll miss out each time the minister speaks. Life gets busy, but you'll contribute more in there than sitting in that comfy chair.
Well, possibly if just 2 weeks. I could go to our website, liveoakgalita.org, to see the minister speak. But tell me, if I thought I could, are there more reasons why I should?
Would you like if I say that you'll come into church one day, a smiling kid, that's you, will wave, and that you'll be the one she's waving at? You'll connect with parents too, and learn what's what and who's with who. They'll thank you for the job you did in working hard to teach their kid. And if those reasons aren't ideal, here's one that could appeal. When you teach, you just might find your own beliefs get more refined.
It might be fun if, like you say, kids wave at me at church someday, and I connect with parents while refining my believing style. But in my real life, I don't teach. Or maybe I do. Won't these kids be hard to reach?
Could you, if you knew about the kids who'll be with you? They value interest over skill. They look for patience, heart, and will. They just want folks who'll help them learn. You can sign up at the RE Fall Party and take your turn.
All right. If you will let me be, I'll sign up, and then we'll see. Say, I like this teaching stuff. I don't think I can get enough. Sign me up for 2 weeks more. I should have done this years before. The kids are engaged and we have fun. I recommend this to everyone. Everything you said is true. I've met incredible kids and parents too. I do so like to teach UUs. I am so glad you helped me choose.
That is not a Dr. Seuss story.
As Tracy said, it's a long-lost tale that
Long lost.
you may not have known before.
All right, so we hope you'll join us. We hope
I would
you'll
like
sign
to
up.
add some things to the joys and sorrows. Today is the 15th anniversary of the attack on Matthew Shepard in Wyoming. The ensuing days brought the country at that time together in a kind of resolution to begin the process of dismantling the hateful homophobia which was rampant at that time. And so the story of Matthew Shepard is an important one for the gay community and also for the advancement of the culture in America at large. And sort of related to that is just a word about the wedding yesterday in the Redwoods over at the Botanic Gardens. Some of you may know that for around 10 years I have not performed weddings because I felt like I shouldn't do that until I could get married. And you also know that a couple months ago, with the dismantling of Proposition 8 and DOMA, Bob and I were able to get married after 32 years of being together. And so it was time to open up the gates, and I was completely thrilled when Lars and Colleen asked me to perform their wedding. So it was a monumental day for them, and it was a monumental day for me. So just to let you know, I'm back in business if you want to get married. This sermon was written, as many of my sermons that I've been giving here, was written a while ago, a couple of years ago, and the original title of it was "Forgiveness is Good for Your Health." And remember last month we did a sermon called "Church is Good for Your Health," and it said that going to church can make you healthy, healthier than people that don't go to church. However, I decided to change the title of the sermon because of some things that happened back then, just a day or two before the sermon was to be delivered. And I changed it to "Forgiveness is Good for Your Heart." And that's because 2 or 3 days before the sermon, I had a crisis of my heart. Back then, I was the interim minister down in Escondido, and just days before the sermon, I was rushed to Palomar Hospital in Escondido with some disturbing chest pains. They had been happening for some time, but usually only when I was working out at the gym, which I did every morning. I was trying to lose weight. But then one day, the pains woke me up and alarmed me to the point that I called the advice nurse at Kaiser, and she told me to hang up immediately and call 911 and get to the hospital emergency room. Immediately. And if you need to, call 911 and have an ambulance. But no matter what it takes, you need to get down there right now. And so Bob took me down right away. And within minutes of my arrival, I was ushered into the heart attack investigation system that most hospitals have. And I was really kind of embarrassed because I said it wasn't really that bad, but they wouldn't listen. They treated me as though I was having a full-blown heart attack. And they began testing and prodding and poking around on my body. There was an immediate EKG and drawing of blood, and then there were x-rays, and then the placement of those sticky little things all over your body that connects to a machine that begins to monitor the heart in every single second. And I kept saying, but it's really not that bad. You guys are going overboard here, but they wouldn't listen. It was as if I had entered the predetermined, non-stoppable process for treating heart attack victims. And in fact, that's exactly what it was. Because of this urgency on the part of the emergency room workers, I started getting scared. I believed the pains to be rather minor, but then I became convinced that maybe I really was in a life-threatening situation. And I actually began to wonder if I was going to die. And I started thinking about my life, flashing before me, and thinking about the important parts of my life, and about Bob, and about my kids, and about their kids, and about lifelong friends and relatives, all of whom lived far away. And perhaps because I was raised as a fundamentalist Christian, I began to ask the question if I was ready to die. Have I made things right in my life? Have I got things hanging on in my life that I need to let go of? And I remembered many of the wrong things I had done in my life. And I began thinking of the wrong things that were done to me in my life. And then I wondered if I had asked for forgiveness. And have I been forgiven? In the hour of my crisis, I wondered about my heart condition. And I wondered about the condition of my heart. And marveled at the astonishing correlation between my physical heart and my spiritual heart. I realized I could not separate the two. I just stopped in to see what condition my condition was in, Kenny Rogers sang some years ago. In the evening of the first day at Kaiser, a heart specialist came to speak to me. I'd been there all day long doing all the tests, worrying, stressed, tense. He was a really neat guy. He was head of the cardiology department there at Palomar, even though he worked for Kaiser. He was a gentle man, a humble man, soft-spoken, exactly the right kind of person to talk to in a time of crisis. He had with him information about my health history, the results of the tests that I'd taken over the 2 years that I'd been there. He knew about my knee surgery that I'd had recently and about the recovery from that. He knew everything about me physically. And officially, he was there to advise me to spend the night in the hospital so that additional tests could be made, and especially a stress test on a treadmill where they try to get your heart to work up to its limit to see what would happen. And if you're going to have a heart attack, that's the right place to have a heart attack. It's on the treadmill. And all the doctors are standing around looking at their little buzzers and things. It was my decision to stay, but the doctor said, you ought to do this. so that we can really be sure that you're okay. And while we were talking, he also asked questions about my lifestyle, including what I did for a living. And I told him that I was a minister. And his immediate response to that was to ask about stress levels in my life. You know, stress is related somehow to this whole thing. He said that I need to be sure to let go of stress as much as I could. He said that stress was dangerous to my heart. And I told him that amazingly, ironically, and surprisingly, this was exactly what I was going to talk about in next Sunday's sermon. Specifically about the stress that comes from holding grudges, about the burden of carrying thoughts of hatred and revenge, about not forgiving. The name of the sermon, I told him, is "Forgiveness is Good for Your Health." And he said, fascinated with the idea, he said, "It's also good for your heart." He then quite seriously asked me, in a kind of change of roles and change of mood, he said, "Well, how do you forgive? How is forgiveness even possible sometimes?" And he went on to confess to me that the past couple of weeks had been very hard for him, and he had been woefully wronged in his life, and he didn't know what to do. "How do you forgive?" he asked. So there I was in the emergency room of a big hospital with a possibly serious heart condition, talking to a doctor about his heart condition. I had to confess to him that forgiving is not easy for me either. It's never easy to forgive, especially the greater the wrong that's been done, the harder it is to let go of it. And I know that I'm the kind of person that holds on to grudges forever. I can hold a grudge from now forever. But there is a story. There is a kind of parable that many of us experienced, and I told him that I would tell him this story and that maybe it would help him too. You may remember that some years ago there was a horrific shooting which occurred at an Amish one-room schoolhouse in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. The gunman, named Charles Carl Roberts IV, took hostages and shot 10 girls between the age of 6 and 13, killing 5 of them before committing suicide in the schoolhouse. Following the tragic shooting, reporters throughout the world invaded Lancaster to cover the story. However, in the days and hours following the shooting, a different and an unexpected story developed. In the midst of their unbelievable grief over this loss, the Amish community did not cast blame. They didn't point fingers. They didn't hold a press conference with attorneys at their side. Instead, they reached out with grace and compassion toward the killer's family. The afternoon of the shooting, an Amish grandfather of one of the girls who was killed expressed forgiveness toward the killer, Charles Roberts. And that same day, Amish neighbors visited the Roberts family to comfort them in their sorrow and pain. Later that week, the Roberts family was invited to the funeral of one of the Amish girls who had been killed. And Amish mourners outnumbered non-Amish at Charles Roberts' funeral. It's ironic that the killer was tormented for 9 years by the premature death of his own young daughter. He never forgave God for her death. Yet after he cold-bloodedly shot 10 innocent Amish schoolgirls, the Amish almost immediately forgave him and showed compassion toward his family. In a world at war and a society that points fingers endlessly at each other and blames other people endlessly for all of their problems, this reaction was unheard of. Many reporters and interested followers of the story asked, how could they forgive such a terrible, unprovoked act of violence against innocent lives? And the Amish culture closely follows the teaching of Jesus, you might know, who taught his followers to forgive one another and to place the needs of others before themselves and to rest in the knowledge that good can come out of any situation. Love and compassion toward others, it should be life's theme. Vengeance and revenge, the Amish believe, is left to God. That story has never left me and comes to me when I am faced with the dilemma of letting go of something and someone that has wronged me. So the doctor heard that story, and he actually began to weep in it. And he said, "Thank you for attending to me in this difficult time." And I said, "Thank you for attending to me in this difficult time." At the end of my hospital stay, it was determined that I actually had indigestion and that omeprazole was probably the answer, and that in fact my heart was in excellent shape. But you know, sometimes you have to go through stuff to really learn the lesson that's to be there. That whole idea of forgiveness is such a big thing. Surely you know that I've encountered that here at Live Oak. And I've heard it from individuals, and I think I've heard it even from the group, that part of the issue here is a matter of forgiveness. So it's a subject that's always around. The Jews have a holiday where they address this thing. It's called Yom Kippur, part of the High Holy Days, most important holiday on the Jewish calendar. Yom Kippur demands that we ask forgiveness, first from other people whom we have offended in some way, and then we ask forgiveness from God. Forgiveness is also a big part of the Christian religious picture. In fact, in traditional Christian theology, forgiveness is at the center of everything, theologically. And again, believers are asked to be forgiving in every aspect of their lives. And the formula is actually written down in the most famous of Christian prayers, the Lord's Prayer, which pleads with God, "Forgive us our trespasses, even as we forgive those who trespass against us." And it's an equation. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. So the subject of forgiveness is a positively theological subject. It's a subject about spirituality. It's a subject about how we live our lives. And it's a subject about the condition of our hearts. Studies have shown that people who are forgiving, and maybe you know people like that, they're forgiving people. They like to forgive people, even under harsh circumstances. These studies show that people who are forgiving are in better emotional, physical, and spiritual health than those who hold on to grudges and vengeance. There was even a study up in Stanford called the Forgiveness Project. And all the major religions and traditions of the world valued this idea. And this study, which they did the same kinds of things that they did to my heart by putting electrodes and things on your head and looking at scans and looking at x-rays, they discovered that people who are forgiving have a better condition of their bodies, and they're healthier, and so is their heart. Here's the reason that I believe that the traditions such as the Jewish Yom Kippur have endured for the millennia. It is the reason that the religious impulse has lasted since the first time human beings gathered themselves together in rudimentary forms of society. There are better ways to organize a society, and holding forgiveness as a primary cultural value makes human social systems work better. And the heart of the culture, the heart of the society is healthier. At Hope College in Michigan, there is a forgiveness laboratory. And scientists put these electrodes on the volunteers, and they measure their heart rate and blood pressure and sweat and muscle tension and all the indicators of stress, while they advise the participants to think about the grudges that they're holding. And they discovered a robust psychological difference between the non-forgiving and the forgiving people. And so it is that studies have been done, scriptures have been written, and we talk about it in the religious community all the time. And so, are we ready to forgive? Are you ready to forgive? And as you're answering that question, you might just close your eyes for a moment and think about, well, is there anything I really need to forgive? I'm not so sure there is. Oh, wait, what about that time when so-and-so did so-and-so to me? Oh, and what about that time that I did something to myself and haven't let go and begun to forgive myself? Because you know it works that way too. You can forgive others, but the hardest thing of all is to forgive myself. That's my experience. So you know about that, and it's something about letting go, I think, and giving up something, whether it be anger or the right to revenge. They found in these studies that a lot of people hold on to the revenge because they feel like they have control over the situation by holding on to it, when in fact they're most likely to lose control and be controlled by the emotions of vengeance than having a control over the subject. Letting go is hard for me because I don't want to allow my offenses to be devalued. I have a right to feel the way that I do. What has happened to me when I have been harmed must not be dismissed, and I courageously hold on to my almighty vengeance. But forgiveness really is about letting go. It's also about justice, which is the balancing of things. Does the old notion of an eye for an eye really work in human affairs? It's a very ancient formula, having first been stated in the Code of Hammurabi 1,000 years before Moses and the Ten Commandments. But sometimes, as Martin Luther King Jr. said, when we start putting each other's eyes out, we're all going to be blind one day. That may not be the best way to run a society or to run your life. And I want to be clear, I'm not suggesting that we excuse the sins of those who have sinned against us. And I'm not saying that we should forget those sins. Some offenses are inexcusable and unforgettable, and you all know what I'm talking about. I am suggesting instead that we learn a healthier way to respond to those sins. And that is the way of forgiveness. My suggestion comes from 1,000 years of human experience and collected wisdom over those years. And I will never forget the story of those Amish families immediately turning the tables on that ancient eye for an eye process, which still seems to rule the world. And I cannot forget that part of the Lord's Prayer. And know that even as I forgive others, I will be forgiven. It's a formula that can lead to health. Forgiveness is, after all, a relational thing. It's a give and take thing. It's a liberal thing. So much in our liberal tradition is about giving, and it's about forgiving. As we have sometimes said around here, what we're doing in this place is that we are for living, and we are for loving, and we are for giving. In the ancient Buddhist traditions, there is an admonition that some people follow and some people consider when they are dying. And maybe you have experienced this being around others as they pass on. In the final moments, you say 4 things. I forgive you. Forgive me. I love you. Goodbye.